welcome to this session on Fields to Fuel, Powering Progress with Biofuels. Before I get into the details of things, let me just quickly introduce the panel. I'm the moderator of the session. My name is Rahool Panandiker. I'm a senior partner and managing director with the Boston Consulting Group. To my left is Mr. Subhash Kumar. He is a senior advisor to the Indian Sugar Manufacturers Association, as well as director, whole-time director of ISMA. We also have with us Charlotte Morton, who is the chief executive of the World Biogas Association. To her left, we have Ashish Kumar, who is the managing director of VERBIO India. And then finally, we have Dr. Atul Mulay, who is the president and strategic business unit head for the bioenergy division for Praj Industries Limited. Last September, we witnessed a very momentous occasion in India as a part of the G20, when we had 9 heads of state hold hands together to form the Global Biofuel Alliance. And hence, there was a momentous point in which almost legitimacy was created at some level, at a global level, for biofuels. But biofuels is not a phenomenon that started last September. We have many people who've been working on this for a long period of time. But there's a lot of things that have to happen for biofuels to get its rightful place as a part of our transition journey, as a part of the growth journey. And hence, today we have a very eminent panel, people who've done this, been there, been on the side of policy and regulation, been on the side of the industry associations, who have tried to push this agenda of biofuels into the center stage. And I'm going to turn to them for their wisdom, for their collective wisdom and their experience, to be able to hone out some messages that we can take in terms of what biofuels means, what is happening, what do we need to do. The last point I want to make is that this topic of biofuels is absolutely in line with the thematic of India Energy Week: growth, collaboration, and transition. Nothing stands for these 3 elements like biofuels. With that, Subhashi, I want to turn it over to you. And help us set the stage first. There's always this debate about, whether it's biofuels or biogas. What role does it play in the future of the energy mix? What role does it play in this whole topic of sustainability? Help us set the stage as to what role that biofuels can play going forward.
Thanks, Rahul, for this question. First of all, thanks a lot for having me here. And also thanks for the fellow panelists for sharing this, with whom I am sharing this panel, so illustrious, and I'm very happy to be prepared to listen to alternative viewpoints. I think since I was also associated with Energy Transition Advisory Committee, and since you raised a very macro question, let me answer it this way: where do biofuels fit in? Now, in energy transition, actually energy can be consumed either as molecule or as an electron. And ideally, it should be consumed closest to the point of production so that the carbon footprint of the energy supply chains is the minimal. From that perspective, if you really look at biofuels, has been happening for ages. You rightly said so. It's not, it might have captured the attention only recently because all attempts are being made. The world has once again realized the importance of biofuel and local solutions to help address the energy solution. So from that perspective, biofuel is one thing which actually very logically fits in, because the supply chain for biofuels is the minimal. And if one were to talk in terms of potential is huge. In India, where we are sitting, actually India is very lucky in quite a few respects for 2 reasons. One is that we have around 51% of our area of arable land compared to global average of around 10%. So it's virtually a delta where we have a lot of capacity to increase the availability of both the kind of residue which is available already, and also, the food, some of the grains which can be used for producing the biofuel. Second thing is, on virtually 2.5% of land area, we have 18% of population. So supply chains can be so very localized that at the end of the day, if anything in any business in the world is to make economic sense, it has to happen here. So I think we have seen the success of bioethanol. It has added to the income of farmers by around 41,000 crores already in 1 year. And CBG, which would be talked of by some of my colleagues on the panel, if one were to realize even the potential which is there in the existing program of 15 million metric tons, 1 million metric ton means roughly $500 million of revenue at $10 of MMBTU. So that's the kind of potential this is about to unleash. And at this stage, at introductory level, I leave it and then, wait for next set of questions.
We'll have plenty to discuss on this. And as you very well pointed out, it's the whole value chain, the ecosystem that needs to come together. Charlotte, I want to turn it over to you. You lead the World Biogas Association. The story of the biogas story itself has been very, very interesting. What are the learnings that you have from the biogas side, which I think would be very interesting to incorporate and onboard when we think about the biofuels side as well, as the broader biofuels?
Thanks. Well, I think the starting point has to be the realization that we humans are generating enormous volumes of organic wastes that are actually causing an enormous problem. So we're talking here about sewage, animal manures and slurries, food waste, etc. And all of these organic wastes are causing pollution of rivers and oceans, and also emitting methane emissions. And we all know that methane emissions are 86 times more harmful than CO2. So here is an enormous problem that we have to address immediately. But it's also an incredible economic opportunity if we can realize it. So I'll come and answer your point in a minute about how we realize it. But just let me give you a context in energy terms, given that we're in India Energy Week. All of those organic wastes contain globally the equivalent of 1/3 of today's natural gas demand. So we're talking about a lot of energy that we can extract, of course, as well as biofertilizers, etc. In an Indian context, we're talking about the equivalent of around 9% of India's total energy demand. So again, a massive opportunity. But the challenge is, how do we deliver it? Because those organic wastes are not just sitting around ready to be collected. And they are under the control of lots of different stakeholders. So the experience from around the world is very clearly that we have to bring all of the stakeholders who are involved in that value chain together and understand how we can get their interests aligned to ensure that those feedstocks and the infrastructure needed to collect them can be then built, and biogas infrastructure can be built to turn all of those organic wastes, which are currently a problem, into an incredibly valuable economic opportunity. And if I can just leave you with one statistic to set the scene about how valuable that opportunity is. If we were to replace, according to the IFEEA, if we were to replace all of the natural gas imports coming into India as LPG with biogas, bio-CNG, that would save, in terms of payments out, $27 billion between financial year 25 to 30. $27 billion is a lot of money that we could invest in urban infrastructure for sanitation and waste management, or in an agricultural context, rural resilience to support farmers and entrepreneurs. So that's something we need to focus on.
Thanks, Charlotte. I think you make a real good case for saying, it's good in every perspective. I think there's you're taking care of the waste, it's an economic opportunity, and the economic drivers are aligning as well. Ashish, let me get back to biofuels, and I think you're very much involved in this. I mean, One of the things that has happened is that the push for biofuels initially, it seems, in the few countries where it has taken off, has been through government mandates. Can you help play out for us, what is it that's really required for biofuels to have those tailwinds to make this work?
Right.
I'm leaving it open-ended so you can completely go.
I'll try my best. So I think with India leading the Global Biofuel Alliance, we really have the opportunity to set the template for a lot of other countries over here. But to set a template, I think we need to talk about the business case, the economic viability of this opportunity. And this is where I would, as you said, I'll go all out, yeah? Without undermining the criticality of the feedstock, which is indeed very critical. But to our impression in the last couple of years, what we have seen is that is beginning to, let's say, it's improving, it's getting managed. We somehow kind of miss out. So I'm going to go from the reverse. I'm going to talk about the revenue streams first, because that's what is critical to make the business case happen. So when we talk about revenue streams, I'm going to talk about the three elements. The first is the gas, of course. We need guarantees, guaranteed offtakes. We need take-or-pay contracts. Just assured offtakes do not make any business case. This definitely is a must now. The second thing we talk about is the digestate or the manure which comes out of the whole process, whether irrespective of the type of biofuel you are making. Now, yes, the government is really trying hard to introduce policies like the market development assistance, but I think we also need to think innovative here, that why don't we incentivize the farmers who are basically not at all as part of this value chain yet on the revenue stream side, that why don't we introduce carbon credits for the farmers if they are utilizing this manure in their farms. Instead of pushing the product, we will end up creating a demand for this product. This will ease a lot. The third revenue stream, which is indeed the most important and the attractive one for any biofuel producer, is how can we monetize the green attribute. And this is at the moment in a very early stage or still non-existent as far as India is concerned. So we are working on CBG certificate scheme, for example, but these three revenue streams are super critical to really get the business case kicking. Now I'll go a step back. So now comes the technology part here, right? Now this is where we need to talk about how can we standardize the specifications, the product specifications, that we are not jumping from one standard to another standard, from one country to another. Yes, there will be always some differences. I'll give you a concrete example over here. I mean, we still do not have the possibility to inject gas directly into the trunk pipelines because of specifications. So why don't we introduce such specifications which help the producers to directly inject into it, right? And lastly, I think the feedstock part indeed remains at the heart of it, right? The only solution, what we think, is that we need to have ultra-mechanized solutions for this, and this is where the government, the producers have to pitch in together, right, to really make it commercially viable.
Thanks, Ashish. I think thanks for that very comprehensive perspective. I think we've gone all the way from the market side, touching on regulation, technology, but I want to double click on technology, but I want to take it to Atul a little bit. I mean, I think you represent the industry that's been pioneering in terms of technology, and I'd like to put it to you. What role will technology play? And I want to expand that a little bit. Not just the role that technology will play in India, India-specific biostocks. What role do you think technology plays broader, and what collaborations do we need to be thinking about when we think about technology?
So, thank you, Rahul, and good afternoon, everybody. My co-panelist, member and member sitting here. In fact, the topic which we have picked up, the fields to fuel, powering the progress of biofuel, is something which is very close to our heart. And then what we have seen, we have witnessed the success of this in India, which is inclusive growth. And one of the great, I would say, the advantage of biofuel is actually getting into the inclusive growth, and we have seen the success, especially for a 1G. Now coming to your specific question about the technology. Technology plays very, very important role, not only from the investor perspective, but now today from a carbon reduction perspective, the carbon intensity reduction perspective is going to be very, very important. Today we have seen a success, and today probably we know the biofuel globally, you started with the ethanol as a first, but now from first generation ethanol to advanced biofuel, second generation ethanol, compressed biogas, RNG, sustainable aviation fuel, there are so many spectrums available from a biofuel side. Today, globally, the people have only touched on the 1G side, and 1G also the raw material specific. It could be sugary raw material or it could be grain raw material. But the advanced biofuel, second generation cellulosic raw material, and so is the case for the compressed biogas plant from your agro residue, from the effluent 1G residue to biomass residue, everything. Technology plays important role, gives a confidence. When I talk about inclusive growth, ultimately the benefit should pass on to the lowest value chain person, including financial institution. And technology plays important role in giving you right profitability and right payback period. If you have a right technology, probably you will have a much better payback periods and you are more sustainable on your business side. I'll just give you examples. The technology, apart from this profitability, is also talked about in today's world. The whole complex is going for a CI reduction. The technology should be that we should minimize the CI footprint. Carbon intensity, carbon reduction has to be a minimum. And globally, what you see now, particularly in the US, they're talking about low carbon fuel standards. And probably that's the way from a global biofuel alliance is somewhere we'll have to also have some collaboration, some understanding from the US side of it, from a policy side. And that will give you more confidence from the carbon market perspective. Today, the carbon market is missing in the whole of this value chain. Technology will definitely play a role for giving you a promoter, good profitability, and carbon intensity reduction. That's the two major roles technology will certainly play.
Thanks, Atul. Ashish, when you talked about it, there are two more points that struck my mind, which I want to go on. But I'll ask one of those to Subhash, which is, as your role as senior advisor to ISMA. There's always this constant debate, feed versus food. In a country like India, as we can all imagine, it's a sensitive topic to talk about. I think there's no one better than you to actually help us demystify that situation. And I want to combine that with everything else. Right? We talk about biofuels, we want to scale it up. I mean, that's the whole idea, for it to play its rightful role. Feedstock's going to become a very key consideration when we're thinking about that. If we've got the technologists, we'll figure out if we're going to solve the market puzzle. But feedstock's going to become a major part of the puzzle. And while it contributes to inclusive growth, how is the industry thinking about that? I mean, the first is the feed to food, and the second, as we scale up, how do we figure out, what kind of feedstock, how much of feedstock, how do we aggregate it? Or do you know of any best practices, examples where you've seen this work out really well?
Rahul, thanks for having that question, because I realized that will come up for discussion at some point in time. I think it's a very important question. So not only food versus fuel conflict, it is also fodder conflict. Because at the end of the day, you also need to take care of livestock. Now, is enough of biofuel or bioresidue available, input side available in the country, or at least I'm talking of India context at this stage, to see that the biofuel can be a significant part of our energy value chain? I sincerely believe yes, because if you really look at from 2014 to 2023, what happened really? There is no significant reduction in the food supply in the country. Despite that, the ethanol blending went from somewhere around 1%, 1 point something percent to 12%. And we have a target of taking it to 20% in 2025. Unfortunately, we faced El Nino situation during the current year. Notwithstanding that, the country has enough of potential. So I think there will always be cases, and what you said is right, that you need to be careful. So you need to draw your boundary conditions such that the food and fodder continue to get the priority. There will be, because it's at the end of the day, this bioresidue is dependent on the nature and climate to a very large extent. But today, actually, so much of bioresidue is underutilized. You actually incur losses twice. One is you are not utilizing its full potential, something with which Charlotte also alluded to. Second, actually it is becoming part of problem. So the emissions from biofuel are causing problems. So you are suffering twice. Today, the available residue is so much that already ethanol, if one were to go, in fact, the industry is already proposing that it is better to go for E100 standard so that one does not have to bother about the policy continuity, E20, E27, then what? I think better to set a policy, let the market take care. The government has done enough to support the sector, but few last things need to be facilitated, some of which were actually also, alluded to by Ashish ji, especially giving, assuring the sustained financial viability of the bio-based businesses. But I don't see that it's a conflict, in fact, for the time being, but there could be certain, fit cases where on a case-to-case basis, probably there would be a need to intervene and then ensure that food and fodder supply is not affected. India, there's no such case. With 51% arable land, which I alluded to earlier, I think we are today underutilizing a huge fuel supply value chain, which we should have done on yesterday basis. If we have not done it on yesterday basis, next best day is to commit and do it today. Any delay in this regard is a wasted opportunity.
Let me just ask the second part of that question. We know this value chain is fragmented. The effectiveness of the feedstock as a part of the solution rather than as a part of the problem comes when you can actually figure out how to make that work together. Any good examples you've seen, especially in India where the fragmentation can be even more? And I'll throw this open to anyone because I'm sure you face that as well.
So I actually will take the first take on this. I think it's right that for any system to acquire scale, you need to ensure that there have to be good success stories. And there is no better area than the sugar sector to make it happen. They have complete access to the feedstock. They have an ecosystem. They have, excellent relationship with the farming community in their area. They're almost, blended. I mean, the farmers and the sugar sector depend on each other. So, and so much of feedstock is available. Maybe not known to many. Entire amount of energy, the electricity required to run the sugar factories in the country is produced internally within the sugar sector. In fact, sugar sector is a major exporter of power. Close to, 1 gigawatt of power is exported by sugar, green energy. Notwithstanding that, enough of residue is left. We are working with Indian Institute of Science for, converting into, for experimentation, for converting into hydrogen, and probably working on things like methanol and SAF to be the eventual area. So I think there are enough of options, and so potential is huge. And if there are successes in certain areas, I can think of sugar sector because I am working very closely. There could be other sectors equally well placed. But in other cases, actually, the feedstock input side ecosystem creation had certain problems which have been resolved very well by the new businesses which have come in that domain.
Any other thoughts, Atul or Ashish or Charlotte? Do you want to please?
Well, yes, I'd love to just come in there on the fact that, as you mentioned, other parts of the world have very established biogas industries, and so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What we need to do is to bring the best of the regulation and policy mechanisms that have already demonstrated that they can facilitate the growth of the biogas industry, and we need to bring those into a global biogas regulatory framework that can be adopted everywhere. And I'm pleased to say that we have funding from the Global Methane Hub, and we're supported by Total Energies and GHD as well, to develop just such a global biogas regulatory framework, as well as an international AD certification scheme, which will have linked to it a standardized life cycle assessment and linking that also to biomethane certificates, which will then ensure that operators are rewarded for maximum decarbonisation, which will help also with the economic case and ensure that effectively we are able to scale up an industry exceedingly fast, because now speed is very much of the essence. And so we absolutely need to standardize and ensure that every plant is designed, built and operated well and maximizing decarbonization. So I think that's what we need to do today, is to bring the lessons learned from around the world. And India is a fantastic opportunity because the leadership here is very supportive, and having been invited to be a founding member of the Global Biofuels Alliance, that would be our contribution to that alliance, that which I think will allow other countries to then follow suit, following on from India's leadership.
Thanks, Charlotte. I think you've raised a lot of multiple points which I want to come back to, because I think they're equally relevant for the biofuel industry per se in a very specific sense. But Ashish and Atul, Ashish, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll just continuing on the same feedstock topic, right?
Yes, thank you.
So I think the relevant discussion in India probably will not be a food versus fuel discussion. I think so, and I think probably we are going to be talking about fodder versus fuel, and that too after a couple of years maybe, because right now nobody is fighting for that. I mean, we are not in that luxury space at the moment. I mean, just purely talking about agri, India generates 750 million tons annually, right? And we have got less than 10 biogas plants. So, I mean, let's not over-exaggerate this issue of feedstock at the moment. What needs to be addressed is this feedstock is available but not accessible. That accessibility has to be addressed via mechanization, by creating those supply chain infrastructure, by machinery. That is what it needs, right? It is not as complicated as we have kind of made it to be, right? Somebody has got to go down, get their hands dirty and do it. Yeah, so.
Let me be provocative there. I mean, on one side, in the spirit of debate, on one side we want offtake guarantees, on the other side we want someone to take care of the aggregation and mechanization. Is that the only way the economics will work, or is there other ways we can think of?
Yes, do it on your own, DIY, right? That's how we are doing it. If I'm going to rely on 10 people to serve me, I mean, then yes, I'm kind of stuck with them.
So you're saying the producers themselves are investing in making sure this...
At least at this stage, in this early stage, a full integrated value chain might not be a bad idea for a lot of people, right? It just helps you better control over the quality and the cost, right? Especially in the current scenario. A lot of people here might not agree to that, but I think we have found a relatively decent amount of success with that, right? So that is why there is some concrete evidence behind it, what I'm making.
You made a very important point. At the present moment, integrating it seems to be a very viable solution. Atul, let me throw it to you, either on these points or I have a separate point related to the question you answered before. We're all talking in many ways 1G, solutions, technologies that can be made viable or largely. For the benefit of the audience, as you think about technology, how are you thinking that combination of feedstock and technology that allows us also the next generation, which may also answer the questions of feed versus fodder and food and all that? How is the technology space thinking about it?
Yeah, Rahul, it's a very interesting question, and then I will not restrict myself only to the agromass. Because when you talk about the feedstock at large, the feedstock is for the first generation, feedstock is for the second generation,
correct.
Feedstock is for the biomass, CBG plant, second generation plant. There are certain good success stories and there are certain areas which we need to address. Now, when I talk about the feedstock, it is not only aggregation or allocation, feedstock also is a policy. So today, the confidence which investor or the financial institution should have, there has to be a sustainable policy for assuring the feedstock. Unfortunately, being in agro industry, we have faced certain ups and downs in the this thing, and that's why some of the policy measures has gone against the feedstock availability. Like for instance, very recently talked about stopping the syrup, stopping the B-heavy molasses from a first generation perspective, stopping maybe FCI rice. So this has given certain anxieties to the people who are investors, voluntary financial institutions. So somewhere availability is there, accessibility is there, but we have to have a channelized mechanism to establish that. It could be central level, it could be state level. That's coming to the first generation side. The the very positive and optimistic approach about the feedstock from the agronomist side. Sugar industry 40 years back was also facing the same problem. But sugar industry themselves have identified and really clear such a mechanism. Today it's a app-based collection of a sugar cane. So probably the 40 years back the sugar industry was there in that situation. Today the industry is separate. We may not need 40 years to go, but probably in 5 years time, we will cover the problem, overcome the problem of the feedstock from the agronomist side. Coming from a technology perspective, feedstock is a very important aspect, which is the technology side also. And there are various technologies. I'll give you examples. If you have a feedstock like a sugar industry, where the filter cakes to be used for the biogas, if it is used during the season, you will have a certain yield. You will get certain ton of CPG out of it. But if it has not been preserved technically or technologically, you may not get a consistency of yield. And that will impact the profitability of the project. So somewhere the technology plays a very important role there. I will also talk about the feedstock, the value of the feedstock then and the value of the feedstock. About 30-40 years back, molasses was considered as a waste. And it was dumped into in the pits, underground pits. No one is looking at it. But today, because of the value which is getting the molasses, they are storing it like gold. So they are storing a molasses in a good tank. They are making the maintenance, proper temperature maintenance, proper preservative there, because it's got a value. So I am quite optimistic that today the sugar industry, what Subhash sir has mentioned, has seen in 40 years, probably the other 1G ethanol or the second generation ethanol CPG industry, we may not take 40 years. Within 5 years, certainly this aggregation system, allocation system will address. Policy sustainability, technology is there, which can ensure you the sustainability of the program, field stock for around the year.
Thank you. I think very interesting points. I'm going to pick up on two other points that Charlotte made, which I think are critical. Every time we talk about biofuels, and I know we're talking within the context of India here a lot, but the goal is for it to become a part of the solution pathway globally, not just in a specific location per se. And I think, Subhash, you made a great argument to say it makes sense, it's a low carbon solution, there's multiple benefits to it, to multiple stakeholders, it's a part of inclusive growth. So I think there's a lot of things that are providing the tailwinds to biofuels. But Charlotte raised 2 points that become critical. For this to become a truly global industry, we're going to have to get standards right, period. I mean, and it may be global guidelines with local standards or the other way around, but something is required, because if not, you're not going to foment neither the passing or collaboration on technology, nor on feedstock, nor on final product offtake, right? And to gain scale, you really need that in some way. So that's the first question. How should we be thinking about standards? Who plays that role? How can we do it? And Charlotte, I'm going to throw this open back to you, because you've already started the journey on that, and I think there's a lot for us to learn from that. The second is, if this is a part of the low carbon solutions pathway, Subhash, the first thing that I think when we hear from industries, especially the off-takers, is the accounting standards on carbon being sorted out. Because tomorrow, you and me can claim all we want, but eventually a company that's looking to go net zero, the carbon standards need to come into place to make sure that the offsets are being accounted for. So on both these questions, Charlotte, what's the World Biogas Association done or is doing to make sure that this global momentum is also built up in some way?
So, yes, as I said, we're developing a global biogas regulatory framework that will bring the suite of regulations and policies that are absolutely necessary for companies like VERBIO to build the biogas infrastructure, and for municipalities to put in place sanitation infrastructure and food waste collection infrastructure or collection mechanisms, bringing the best of the regulation from around the world so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to do this incredibly fast, and there are lots of countries that are already doing it very well. So we can bring those standards and regulations all together in one place in that suite of regulations, together with the certification scheme around ensuring that all biogas plants are designed, built and operated well, and linking to certificates. So we know how to do this already. It's simply a matter of ensuring that everything is joined up, because we're talking about effectively a circular economy technology. And one of the challenges in India is, whilst we have various policy mechanisms such as SATAT, there are lots of gaps in the policies. So it's been very difficult to deliver the 5,000 plants that were represented the ambition. I think we have about 48. So it's because of those gaps that we have the problem, but those can be filled. So I think we do know actually what to do. And our ambition then, having developed the global standard, is then to look at bringing that to India, developing global, the biogas roadmap, if you like, for delivering that full potential in India, bringing together all relevant stakeholders, including all government departments, which is the same issue in every country. It involves 4 or 5 different government departments who all typically think in silos, but we can bring them all together and reach alignment on that suite of regulations so that we can make biogas happen.
Let me just ask the question to the technology and the producing people. What role and what difficulties do you see, if at all, or what do you think needs to be done to make sure that this building of standards incorporates the opinion of the end consumer, the producers, and the technology developers? What are you seeing, because at the end of the day, feedstock, technology and standards are all in some ways, as you were pointing out, interrelated. How can we solve this puzzle? How do we make sure that the global standards, local standards are going to work together? Any examples, any thoughts? Ashish or Atul?
So let's maybe compare the standards what we have in Germany versus what we have in India. I'll talk specifically for the biogas. Now, for example, when we are producing biogas in Germany, we are injecting directly into the trunk. Yeah, so it is not going into a CGD equivalent, or it is not going into cascades. It directly goes into the trunk, because we are able to meet the specifications of the local land. Those specifications are very different from what India has today. And this is where I think the Indian regulator, the Indian industry needs to benchmark and adapt, right? The solution is not to block it. The solution is that and it's not only about Germany, I think the entire EU follows that regulation, right? Whether we talk about methane levels, H2S levels, there are certain standards. It's already being done for the last so many decades. So it's nothing which India needs to do for the first time, right? It's existing there. We just need to look around, take what is running successful and replicate for the local region here. Why we would do that, again going back to the GBA topic over here, we need to create a couple of success stories over here, right? If I'm able to say at the end of the year that, okay, these are the 5 business cases or 10 business cases who are running profitably, they have been able to manage the feedstock, the technology works, right? They're able to get the kind of yields what we are looking at, the product specifications are compliant, and I'm getting my revenue streams, right? If we are able to demonstrate these 5, 10 business cases as success stories, I think that should be the target.
Proof is in the pudding.
Absolutely.
Atul, you?
Yeah. So the global standards are really required to be benchmark and for the Indian condition. But again, I am coming back. There are already standards, global standards. And for instance, first generation ethanol again. So the standards for the fuel ethanol probably same. Probably from a country specific, depending on their net zero targets, you will have to stringent or you will have to dilute it. For instance, we already entered into BS6. So there are standards are set. Similarly, from a sustainable aviation fuel, standards are getting set across the globe. It's only the compressed biogas or a renewable natural gas. It has its own challenge, and the challenge needs to be addressed by technology again. Today, you are basing it completely on agromass, which is not in your control, and it can be mixed of agromass. So you should have the technology in such a way that irrespective of what type of agromass mixing is coming there, you must have a purity of a gas, which is of that whatever standard we desire of a global standard, and that's what the technology will play a role there. But I am certainly agree with all these panelists that there has to be a set of standards required uniformly for the compressed biogas or renewable natural gas.
I want to, I know we're coming close to lunchtime, so I want to be cognizant of that. Just a couple more questions that I want to get through. First one's a simpler one. I want to take that step back, Subhash, and just ask that question. You pointed out, biofuels has a huge potential that addresses many of the issues, and things like biogas, there's many issues that it can address. Have you done any kind of, let's take like maybe the context of India, any kind of socio-economic impact analysis that says, okay, it creates these many jobs, this is the economic potential impact, Because that's in some ways also a way to make that case, to make it forward. If I'll start with Subhash and Ashish, then I'll go to you. Yeah?
So I think, potential is there. And if one were to talk only in terms of 5,000 CBG plants which have been talked of, I'm not talking of other areas as of now, because hydrogen, methanol and all those things, bio-based, are things which will come up over a period of time. So that alone has a capacity to put close to around, $8 billion in the hands of a rural sector. Now this is a sector, very interesting thing, that if you if you really infuse 1 rupee in the rural sector, it changes hand 10 times. The kind of bottom-up multiplicative effect the infusion of capital or income in the rural sector has, it gives the maximum dividend. So if it is, let's say 50,000 at the end of the day at national level, one or the other way it comes back by way of, let's say 10 times of that. Second thing, it creates jobs. So jobs are created near to the place where people are relocated. So people are located. So that also means that the movement of people from villages to city reduces. So actually it has so many positive effects that, the single 5,000 CBG plants have a potential to change the complexion. And I also, in fact, I was waiting for my time and provoked to answer your earlier question, support versus, whether it should be left on its own. I would put it in very simple terms. If you have to light a lamp, so you just take a matchstick and you light it, you go away. But if you have to, take it to bonfire scale, you actually, post lighting, you need to spend 15-20 minutes taking care of it. And as Ashish very rightly said, let that initial set of 50, 100 successful plants come. Once that happens, so that's like taking initial care of bonfire. And once that happens, you don't go back to the bonfire, you start enjoying. So the benefits will come very soon. And I'm pretty sure that CBG is about to happen. I think that trigger is required, policy framework is there. I think nitty-gritty needs to be solved. So the vectors need to be converted into force. That's the only thing missing, I believe.
Ashish, yes? Yeah.
So we did not a very detailed, but a pretty decent level of socio-economic impact assessment of what our one unit can lead to, right? So I think on the social side, a unit like ours, which is, let's say, a large industrial scale unit, we are creating about 800 to 1,000 jobs, direct and indirect both. And these are rural jobs. Yeah, these are not Delhi, Bombay jobs. They don't have jobs today, and they are straight away getting into formal employment, right? That's a big win on the social side. Then we talk about the environmental impact. There are two areas. One is the, for example, if I'm using stubble for the conversion, there is a CO2 emission reduction which is happening due to the less stubble burning happening, and then there is a fuel substitution happening, right? I'm substituting a diesel or a petrol with a clean gas. So on full capacity, our one unit will be saving roughly about 150 to 200,000 tons equivalent of CO2 emission. That's the numbers we are talking about here. Now, in addition to that, the economic side, a plant of this size will end up producing about 10 to 11,000 tons of CBG annually, which means that is the import substitution you have, right? That is the less LNG you need to import, right? So that's again a significant impact on the forex, which we end up paying for the imported gas, right? So, I mean, purely from a socio-economic environmental impact, these are very convincing and very strong numbers to talk about.
Yeah, so
you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, so Rahool, in fact, I started with that it's an inclusive growth story. And when I say inclusive growth story, it's a socio-economic impact. And probably yesterday, they were mentioning that about 85,000 crore rupees equivalent foreign exchange we have saved. And 80% of that foreign exchange saved has gone back to the rural economy, that the farmers, and that's the whole. So it's only not a inclusive, it's a circular economy, bioeconomy, whatever you say, but ultimately the whole consumer, the whole country as such we are benefiting out of it.
I missed out one point which is still very important in this whole impact assessment is the farmer is still missing for me. You know, he is still not getting incentivized. So I would love to see if he starts getting some value out of the carbon credits which he is able to earn, either by not burning his field or by utilizing the manure which he brings back to the field, which ultimately improves the soil health. He is currently not addressed at the moment. And if he becomes part of the story, then I think it gets its own momentum.
You know, I think everyone's made a very convincing argument that says, you know, this is really well-rounded argumentation, right? You're talking about benefits at the rural level, benefits from a technology perspective, the socio-economic impact, creation of jobs, reversing the cycle of urbanization in some ways, desirable or undesirable effects that come with it. All in all, I think there's just really positive momentum. What are the challenges you're facing?
So maybe I'll just take these questions from another question, that this panel of the experts sitting here, that today what is missing is this carbon mechanism.
Right.
So probably that's where from a global biofuel alliance or a clean energy mission, if you can really get this carbon mechanism established for the country and then inter-countries, that's going to help many of the things what Mr. Ashish also mentioning about that the carbon mechanism is a key, and that's what is missing in this value chain linkage.
So one of the priorities in your mind is start thinking about the carbon mechanism, and I think earlier, Ashish, you mentioned right all the way down to the farmer, that could work as an incentive.
Absolutely,
Anything,
yes.
any other challenges that you're seeing?
I would add the infrastructure, which has not been addressed here so far. By infrastructure, I mean the grid.
Just one question related to that. Is financing a concern?
Yes.
Okay.
So infrastructure basically means a gas grid,
Yeah.
which is currently, let's say, not existing for these producers, right? This is something which needs to be taken up on priority, which is being addressed, but I think we are yet to get any specific policy on that. So infrastructure definitely would be one point. Financing you did address. I mean, right now, though we call it priority lending sector and some fancy terms, but it's not happening. It's not really at the ground level, because how does a banker get convinced when he doesn't have concrete contracts? Nobody is going to put their money in. Yes, probably big names, they will be able to finance on their balance sheets. These are corporate finances. They are not project financing. We are talking about project financing. Are you willing to put your money for this particular project without linking it to the balance sheet of the parent? That's the money we are talking about.
Very clear.
So, if I were to add, actually, you know, I'll be realistic. At the end of the day, since actually anything relating to biofuels covers so many departments and ministries. So food is involved, agriculture is involved, the user departments of energy are involved. It's high time that we have some sort of setup which is responsible for making all policies happen. So policies exist. In fact, the kind of policies which have come are very supportive, and in fact one is really impressed by the speed with which policy is coming. But which department and whether different bits and pieces are connecting, that needs to be made happen between the, let's say, agriculture, MNRE, and the user, let's say, Ministry of Petroleum, and all other. So that's something which actually needs to happen, and this can be something which can become a global template also. That's the only thing I see missing. And this also can be a platform which can help the issue of carbon credits for the this sector, because at the end of the day, India would have a problem in this regard, because the farm holding is very small. That farmer is not capable of entering into all the complexities. We at ISMA level are trying to work with knowledge partners to create a system where the credits are taken at factory level, but they are kind of passed on one way or the other. So that model could at some point in time could also become effective, whatever, whether it is sugar waste or some other waste. So I think these two things, these are two big missing links.
Charlotte, I want you to sort of help us wrap up, because you've gone down this journey. The World Biogas Association has put in place many of these things. Any traps, any things that the biofuels community needs to start thinking about, the stakeholder engagement, anything that you think that needs to really will start becoming a critical block if we don't start thinking about it right now?
I think we've talked about all the key issues here, and it is absolutely about bringing all of the relevant stakeholders together, as you said, Subhash, getting all the government departments aligned, and ensuring that we are properly demonstrating the decarbonisation through certification that is actually happening, so that we are no longer sort of open to criticism, if you like, for concerns around food versus fuel, which is actually, I think, it's a bit of a red herring, given that we're wasting a third to half of all the food we produce. So let's focus on actually reducing food waste, capturing food waste and all the other organic waste, and making this happen. I am very confident that actually we have the solutions out there. It is about the political will, and India has shown it has political will. So actually I'm hugely optimistic that India could be the showcase here, and through the Global Biofuels Alliance it can show leadership not just here in India, but also develop a blueprint that can be used in other countries around the world, and to deliver that huge global impact that biofuels can have, which just from a biogas point of view alone would reduce global emissions by 11%, of which a huge proportion is methane emissions. So it's just a win-win-win story, and we can do it.
It's fantastic. I want to wrap up, but I have one question the same question for all of you. As they say, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. I'm asking this on behalf of the Global Biofuels Alliance. We know we have a lot of asks for the Global Biofuel Alliance to do. What are you willing to do, or what are your organizations willing to do for the Global Biofuels Alliance? And if you can try to be brief so that we can all head to lunch afterwards.
So I think we can support it fully and create a mechanism within organization which is fully available to GBA.
We can deliver the Global Biogas Regulatory Framework and International AD Certification Scheme.
I would say from a pure industry point of view, I think the best practices across the different value chain streams, whether we talk about feedstock, I wouldn't be, let's say, technology is something which is very proprietary, and yes, it is very internal. But I think apart from that, across the value chain, this is where a lot of best practices can be shared, and which will also help replicate into other regions, right? There's just one point I'd like to make. I see there's time's up. I just think that the policy framework, what we have at the moment, is evolved over the last 1 year significantly. Not because we are here at this platform, but I would really want to acknowledge and thank MOPNG specifically for coming out with some fantastic, breakthroughs which really impact the business case of this particular. And that is the reason why we will be very keen to contribute to the GBA over here, being a responsible industry stakeholder.
Atul? So Rahool, as Praj Industries, we are already present in 100 countries. So whether it is US, Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia. So what we are bringing to the GBA is innovative technologies and customized engineering solutions which will meet the requirement for building that inclusive growth of the respective countries. That's what the contribution Praj is playing in this GBA.
Well, on that note, and I'm going to take a phrase from Charlotte, which is, this whole field of biofuels is actually a win-win-win. All the industry players are looking forward to actually both contributing and being beneficiaries of what I think this whole world can bring in biofuels. The only thing left for me to do is to thank the panelists for such an engaging discussion, very frank, direct opinions. Thank you very much.